So to start, let's talk a little bit about employees versus independent contractors. I think for small businesses, the easiest way to think about this is when you have an employee, you're the boss. You're telling them what to do, when to do it, how to do it, where to do it, sometimes what to look like while they're doing it. When someone is an independent contractor, they're independent. You're telling them only what the end result is, and you're really leaving it up to them to get to that point. You're paying them for that result. The reason that this matters is that it's not just up to you and that worker to make that determination. The law gets to decide who's an employee and who's not, particularly when it comes to the Internal Revenue Service and tax issues. The way that the IRS looks at this is that if you're controlling the result of the work, then they're independent. But if you're controlling what will be done and how it will be done, then they're an employee. So again, it's right there in the title. They've got to be independent. Even if the worker has some level of discretion, as most professional employees tend to have these days, it really is focused on results and outcome versus dictating all of the details. And it's not so much, well, I give them a bunch of freedom, so then I'll make them an independent contractor. It's, do you have the right to tell them what to do and how to do it and where to do it? And if you have that right, no matter how much freedom you give them, they're still technically an employee. Now, getting this wrong can be a really expensive mistake. Between the IRS and then all the other alphabet government agencies, they can come back and determine that an employee was misclassified. You call them an independent contractor, the IRS comes back and says, nope, you were wrong, they were an employee. And when they do that, there's a variety of penalties and back taxes that they can assess. So for example, you said that John was an independent contractor, so you didn't issue him a W-2 at the beginning of this year, as everybody's in the process of doing. Well, since you didn't do that, and now the IRS is saying, no, you're wrong, John should have been an employee, they can charge you a penalty because you issued that W-2 late, or because the W-2 is missing. Similarly, if John had been treated as an employee, then you would have been paying payroll taxes the whole time that John was working for you. Well, now you haven't paid those taxes, and so the IRS can come back for those back taxes and then tack interest on as well. And then most critically for small businesses, when that happens, you, the owner, can be held personally liable for those back taxes, the penalties, and the interest. So this is one of those exceptions to, oh, I've got my LLC, I've got limited liability protection. This is one of the times where the law will disregard that and can come after you personally for the amount that's owed. So people often joke, there are two things that are always true in life, death and taxes is one of those. That limited liability company, corporation, doesn't matter. You're not getting out of that. So that's why it's so important. That's why we keep harping on knowing the difference and properly classifying people. So some of the things that we start to look at, with an employee, you kind of expect detailed instructions, possibly even training on the job. Whereas with an independent contractor, you would expect them to be working with minimal oversight. Again, if you're giving them detailed instructions, what to do, when to do it, where to do it, how to do it, they start to look like an employee. If you're providing on-the-job training or even periodic training, we're going to have a big training retreat over the course of the summer, or a big training workshop, that tends to make someone look more like an employee than an independent contractor. Similarly, employees expect to be provided with the equipment that they need to do their job. And to the extent that they have to go out and buy anything additional, they often expect to be reimbursed. Not necessarily the case with independent contractors, who for the most part are supplying a lot of their tools and equipment, whatever they need to perform the job, they're providing that themselves. They may sometimes get reimbursed for things like, oh, I had to travel out of town, so I get reimbursement for travel. But you don't expect an independent contractor to come along and say, well, I'd love to do this job for you. I just need you to buy a computer and a printer for me and set me up with a home office, et cetera, and then I'll be able to work independently. It's typically not how that works. Similarly, independent contractors typically have their own business and their own clients, right? So they're allowed to work for other companies. Sometimes they're even allowed to work for your direct competitors. And there's a possibility that the job that they're performing for you, they could earn a profit or there could be a loss. Whereas an employee expects to get paid for their time. And so there's no question of, I might lose money doing this job, as an employee, I expect to get paid for however many hours I put in, and that's the end of that. And then obviously your employees typically, although not always, but typically expect to get hired on indefinitely, right? Most states, including Ohio, are at will employment. So the employee is expecting to get hired and they're going to be there until one or both of you decides that this is no longer working. Whereas with an independent contractor, you typically have someone who is hired for a limited duration, right? They're hired for a particular project. And then once that project is completed, okay, great, they're going to move on to the next project, which might be with someone else. The other key distinction is that an employee often fulfills a core business need, whereas an independent contractor is often providing an ancillary service. So for example, I use this one a lot as an attorney in a law firm. If I hire another attorney to help do client work, that's a core business need. It's going to be really difficult to set up a situation where that other attorney is an independent contractor. If I hire a marketing person to put together these slides, to manage the website, those types of things, that's really an ancillary service. It's not at the core of what my business does. You could easily see making that person an independent contractor.